The rejection came with the kind of polished cruelty that only a five-star establishment could deliver. Marcus Stone stood at the marble reception desk of the Potomac Grand Hotel in Washington, D.C., his confirmation email displayed on his phone, watching as the perfectly manicured receptionist named Victoria typed something into her computer with theatrical concern. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Stone," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But it appears there's been an issue with your reservation. We've had to cancel it due to irregularities in your booking." Marcus, a stocky man in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of alert eyes that never stopped scanning for threats, remained calm despite the familiar sting of discrimination. His worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and the slight tremor in his left hand from an old injury apparently didn't meet the Potomac Grand standards. "What kind of irregularities?" he asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Victoria's eyes flicked over his appearance again, lingering on the scuffed boots and the weathered duffel bag at his feet. "Our system flagged certain inconsistencies. Security concerns, you understand. Perhaps I could recommend another establishment more suited to your needs." Behind him, other guests in designer suits and evening gowns glided past, their reservations unquestioned. Marcus felt the old anger rise, the same feeling he'd carried through 3 tours in Iraq and 8 years in the Secret Service, but he pushed it down with practiced control. What Victoria didn't know, what the hotel's supposedly sophisticated security screening had failed to reveal, was that Marcus Stone had spent 4 years as head of President Donald Trump's personal security detail. The man they were turning away had protected the most powerful person in the world, had taken a knife meant for the president in 2018, and had coordination authority over the entire Secret Service detail during some of the most challenging times in recent history. And in exactly 3 hours, several members of that same security detail, along with some very high-ranking individuals, would be arriving for a reunion dinner Marcus had organized. The Potomac Grand was about to learn that discriminating against a veteran was bad enough, but discriminating against a member of the presidential protection family was a mistake that would echo through the highest corridors of power in Washington. Marcus stepped back from the reception desk, his movements measured and controlled, the same way he'd moved through countless threat assessments and security sweeps. He'd faced armed terrorists, would-be assassins, and hostile crowds. A condescending hotel receptionist wasn't going to break him, even if the rejection stung more than he cared to admit. He picked up his duffel bag, the weight familiar and comforting, and turned to leave without another word. There was no point in arguing. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting in the moment. I'm curious where you're watching this story unfold today. Whether you're in our nation's capital, a small town in America, or anywhere around the world, drop your location in the comments below. Let's see how far this message about respecting those who've protected our highest leaders can travel. As Marcus walked toward the exit, he passed the concierge desk where a young man was helping an elderly couple with theater tickets. The concierge glanced up, did a double take, and his eyes widened with recognition. "Mr. Stone?" he called out tentatively. "Marcus Stone?" Marcus paused, turning slightly. The concierge, whose name tag read David, abandoned the elderly couple mid-sentence and hurried over. "Sir, I thought that was you. I'm David Chen. You probably don't remember, but I was an intern at the White House during your time there. You gave a security briefing to our group in 2019. You told us about situational awareness, about always having an exit strategy." Marcus studied the young man's face, and a faint memory surfaced. "You asked about the difference between perceived and actual threats." David's face lit up. "Yes. You said the most dangerous threats are often the ones that look harmless. Sir, what are you doing here?" "Leaving," Marcus said simply. "My reservation was just canceled." David's expression shifted from excitement to confusion. "Canceled? But why would they?" His voice trailed off as he looked from Marcus's casual attire to Victoria at the reception desk, understanding dawning on his face. Oh no. "It's fine, David. Not your problem." "Actually, sir, it might be." David pulled out his phone. "You see, I kept in touch with some people from my White House days. including Sarah Morrison from the advance team. She mentioned you were organizing some kind of reunion dinner here tonight. Marcus nodded slowly. Presidential Protection Division alumni dinner. 25 years of agents getting together. David's fingers were already flying across his phone screen. Sir, do you mind if I make a call? Because canceling your reservation means they just canceled the reservation of the person coordinating dinner for about 30 current and former Secret Service agents, including, he paused, looking at something on his phone, including the current Deputy Director of the Secret Service. David, you don't need to... Mr. Stone, you taught us that loyalty goes both ways. You protected our president. The least I can do is make a phone call. As David stepped away to make his call, Marcus found a chair in the lobby and sat down. His left hand was trembling more than usual. It always did when he was stressed. The injury had come from a campaign rally in Phoenix in 2018. A man with a knife had rushed the stage. Marcus had intercepted him, taking a deep stab wound to his left arm that had severed nerves and left him with permanent partial paralysis. The president had visited him in the hospital, had personally ensured he received the best care, had called him a hero. But none of that mattered to people like Victoria, who saw only a middle-aged man with a disability and decided he didn't belong. His phone buzzed. A text from Mike Patterson, his former deputy. ETA 45 minutes. Johnson's flying in from Miami. Chen and Williams confirmed. Even Thompson's coming down from New York. Marcus typed back, slight hiccup with the venue, working on it. Need help? Marcus glanced at David, who was speaking rapidly into his phone, gesturing animatedly. Maybe. Stand by. Across the lobby, Victoria was dealing with a new arrival, a man in an expensive suit who was complaining about his suite not being ready. She fawned over him, apologizing profusely, offering complimentary services. The contrast with how she'd treated Marcus wasn't lost on anyone watching. David returned, his face flushed with excitement. Mr. Stone, Sarah's making some calls. Also, she said to tell you that Director Harrison is actually arriving early. He's about 20 minutes out. James Harrison, Deputy Director of the Secret Service. Marcus's former colleague, now one of the most powerful people in federal law enforcement. This was about to get interesting. Did you tell them about the cancellation? David nodded. Sarah's exact words were, they canceled Stone's reservation. Do they have any idea what they just did? 15 minutes later, Marcus was still sitting in the lobby when a black SUV pulled up outside. Not unusual for D.C., except this one had government plates and the subtle antenna array that marked it as a federal vehicle. James Harrison stepped out, tall and imposing even in civilian clothes, his eyes scanning the area with the same professional awareness Marcus recognized from their years working together. Harrison entered the hotel and spotted Marcus immediately. His expression darkened as he took in the scene. Marcus sitting alone with his bag, clearly not checked in despite the reunion starting in 2 hours. Stone, Harrison said, approaching with the kind of purposeful stride that made people get out of his way. Why are you sitting in the lobby? Good to see you too, Jim. Small problem with the reservation. What kind of problem? Before Marcus could answer, Victoria called out from the reception desk. Sir, I'll be with you in just a moment. Harrison glanced at her, then back at Marcus. Is she the problem? She's doing her job as she sees it. Apparently, I don't meet the Potomac Grand standards. Harrison's expression went from dark to thunderous. Stay here. He walked to the reception desk, cutting ahead of the line with the kind of authority that made people step aside without complaint. Victoria looked up, her customer service smile faltering slightly at his expression. I'm James Harrison, Deputy Director of the United States Secret Service, he said, producing his credentials. I understand you canceled Marcus Stone's reservation. The color drained from Victoria's face. There were irregularities, security concerns. Security concerns? Harrison's voice was dangerously quiet. Ma'am, are you telling me that your hotel's security assessment flagged a former head of presidential protection as a security risk? The man who has the highest security clearance possible, who has protected the President of the United States, who has been wounded in service to this country. Your system flagged him as a concern. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Because you looked at his appearance and made assumptions. Let me explain something to you. In about 90 minutes, 30 of the most highly trained protection specialists in the world are arriving for a reunion dinner that Mr. Stone organized. These are people who have protected presidents, vice presidents, foreign heads of state, and you just told their coordinator, a decorated veteran and wounded hero, that he's not welcome in your establishment. Victoria was frantically typing now. I can fix this. I can reinstate the reservation. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, you've just insulted not only Mr. Stone, but every agent who's ever put their life on the line for this country. You've told us that our service, our sacrifice, means nothing if we don't wear the right clothes. The lobby had gone quiet. Other guests were watching, some recording on their phones. The manager, alerted by the commotion, emerged from a back office. Is there a problem here? The manager, Mr. Whitfield, asked, though his confidence wilted when Harrison turned to face him. Your receptionist canceled the reservation of a Secret Service reunion dinner coordinator because she didn't like how he looked. So yes, I'd say there's a problem. Marcus's phone was buzzing constantly now. Word had spread through the network with the speed that only a close-knit protection community could manage. Agents were arriving early, changing plans, converging on the Potomac Grand. 20 minutes later, the hotel lobby looked like a Secret Service convention. Men and women in various stages of dress, some in suits having come from headquarters, others in casual clothes like Marcus, filled the space. They greeted Marcus with handshakes and hugs, each arrival adding to the growing crowd. Mike Patterson arrived, still imposing at 62, wearing jeans and a polo shirt. Heard they gave you trouble, Stone. Sarah Morrison from the advance team showed up with 3 other agents. Marcus, David told me everything. This is unacceptable. Tom Chen, who'd lost his leg in a motorcade bombing but still served in a training capacity, made his way over on his prosthetic. They discriminated against you? Did they not see the knife scar? The stories began to flow, each agent sharing their own experiences of discrimination, of being judged for their appearance, their injuries, their age. The lobby became an impromptu gathering place for some of the most elite protection specialists in the world. And then, the moment that changed everything. A motorcade pulled up outside. Not unusual for DC, but this one was different. This one had the specific configuration, the specific vehicles, the specific bearing that meant only one thing. Is that? Someone started to ask. The door of the middle vehicle opened, and out stepped a figure instantly recognizable to anyone who followed American politics. Former President Donald Trump, accompanied by his current Secret Service detail, walked toward the hotel entrance. The lobby erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't planned. The former president wasn't supposed to be at the reunion. Trump entered the hotel, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found Marcus. His expression softened, and he made his way over, the crowd parting respectfully. Stone, Trump said, extending his hand. Heard you were having some trouble. Marcus stood, shaking the offered hand. Mr. President, you didn't need to come? Yes, I did. Trump turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying that familiar presidential authority. This man saved my life. Phoenix 2018. Guy with a knife got within 10 feet of me. Stone intercepted him, took a knife wound that nearly ended his career. You know what he said when I visited him in the hospital? He apologized for letting the guy get that close. He turned back to Marcus. I heard what happened here. Some receptionist decided you weren't good enough for their hotel, the man who protected the President of the United States. Mr. Whitfield, the manager, had gone pale. Victoria looked like she might faint. The entire lobby was recording now, phones out openly. Mr. President, Whitfield stammered, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea. That's the problem, Trump interrupted. You had no idea because you didn't bother to find out. You saw a man with a tremor in his hand wearing regular clothes and decided he didn't belong. You know what that tremor's from? Nerve damage from the knife wound he took protecting me. Harrison stepped forward. Mr. President, we were just explaining to the manager here about their discrimination problem. Trump nodded. Jim, good to see you. Still keeping the current guy safe? Yes, sir. Though I learned everything I know from Stone here. The reunion had effectively moved to the lobby. Agents shared stories, caught up on life, all while the hotel staff watched in growing horror at what they'd nearly done. Finally, Mr. Whitfield approached Marcus directly. "Mr. Stone, I cannot apologize enough. This is inexcusable. Your reservation is reinstated, of course, and we'd like to offer you our presidential suite at no charge. The entire reunion dinner will be complimentary. And I don't want special treatment," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted to check into my room and host a dinner for my colleagues." "Nevertheless," Whitfield continued, "we insist, and I'll be having a long conversation with our staff about making assumptions based on appearance." Victoria had approached, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Stone, I'm so sorry. I made assumptions. I didn't think—" "That's right," Marcus said, not unkindly. "You didn't think. Maybe next time you will." The dinner that night was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, upgraded from the smaller room Marcus had originally booked. The Potomac Grand, desperate to make amends, pulled out all the stops. But the most powerful moment came when Trump, who stayed for the dinner, raised a toast. "To Marcus Stone," he said, "and to all of you who serve in the shadows, who take the risks, who bear the scars. You're the ones who make it possible for people like me to do our jobs. And to anyone who thinks you're not good enough because of how you look or the wounds you carry, they're wrong. You're the best of us." The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt the weight of years of service, of wounds both visible and invisible, lift slightly. He looked around the room at his brothers and sisters in service, at the former president who'd come to support him, at the hotel staff who were learning a valuable lesson about assumptions and respect. Later that evening, as the dinner wound down, David Chen approached Marcus. "Mr. Stone, I wanted to thank you. When you gave that briefing years ago, you told us that integrity means doing the right thing even when it's hard. Today, you showed me what that really means." "I didn't do anything special, David. Just tried to check into a hotel." "No, sir. You handled discrimination with dignity. You didn't throw your weight around, didn't immediately call in favors. You were just going to walk away and find another place. That's character." As the agents began to leave, many exchanged numbers with Marcus, promising to stay in better touch. The bonds forged in service, they realized, shouldn't be allowed to fade just because they were no longer on active duty. Mr. Whitfield found Marcus before he headed to his room. "Mr. Stone, I want you to know that we're instituting new training for all our staff. What happened today? It's changed how we do business. We're also creating a partnership with veteran organizations to ensure this never happens again." Marcus nodded. "That's good to hear. Just remember, it's not about giving veterans special treatment. It's about not making assumptions based on appearance." "I understand, and I'm truly sorry." As Marcus finally made it to his room, the presidential suite he hadn't asked for but which they'd insisted on, he sat on the bed and allowed himself a moment of reflection. His hand was trembling more than usual, the stress of the day taking its toll. But as he looked at the scar on his arm, the permanent reminder of that day in Phoenix, he felt something he hadn't felt in a while. Pride. Not pride in being recognized or vindicated, but pride in his community. When one of them was disrespected, they all showed up. From David Chen making a phone call to the former president changing his schedule, the protection community had proven that their bonds went beyond politics, beyond active service, beyond everything except the fundamental respect they had for each other. His phone rang. It was his daughter in Seattle. "Dad, I just saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. They said President Trump showed up personally?" "He did. Caused quite a stir." "Dad, I'm so proud of you. The way you handled it with such dignity. You could have made a scene, could have thrown your credentials around from the start." "That's not who we are, honey. We protect and serve. We don't bully or intimidate." "I know. That's what makes you heroes." After the call, Marcus stood at the window looking out over Washington, D.C., the city where he'd spent the best years of his career, where he'd served at the highest levels, where he'd nearly died protecting the president. The city that had just taught him that while some people would always judge by appearances, there were many more who understood that true worth couldn't be measured by clothes or physical appearance. The tremor in his hand had subsided. Tomorrow, he'd check out of the hotel and go home. But tonight, he was surrounded by the respect and camaraderie of his brothers and sisters, in service, in a suite he hadn't asked for, in a hotel that had learned a valuable lesson. Victoria had been wrong. He did belong here. Not because a former president had vouched for him, not because of his service record, not because of the reunion dinner. He belonged because every person who serves their country, who bears the scars of that service, who continues to live with dignity despite discrimination, they all belong. They've earned their place through sacrifice, and no amount of marble lobbies or five-star pretension could change that. As he prepared for bed, Marcus noticed a handwritten note that had been slipped under his door. It was from Victoria. "Mr. Stone, I wanted to write this personally. Today I learned that heroes don't always look like they do in movies. Sometimes they look like regular people with trembling hands and worn clothes. I'm ashamed of how I treated you, but I'm grateful for the lesson. My grandfather was a veteran who faced similar discrimination. I dishonored his memory today. I promise to do better. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your grace in the face of my ignorance." Marcus folded the note carefully and placed it in his wallet. People could change. Understanding could grow from ignorance. That, perhaps, was the most important victory of the day. The Potomac Grand Hotel would remember this day, not as the day they almost turned away a veteran, but as the day they learned that respect shouldn't be reserved for those who look the part. Every person who walks through their doors has a story, and some of the most remarkable stories come in the most unassuming packages. Marcus Stone, former head of presidential protection, wounded warrior, and organizer of Secret Service reunions, had reminded them of that truth. And in doing so, he'd reminded a watching nation that those who serve deserve respect, not for their appearance or current status, but for their sacrifice and continued dignity in the face of discrimination. The tremor in his hand was a badge of honor, not a mark of weakness. His worn clothes were a choice of comfort, not a sign of unworthiness. His quiet dignity in the face of discrimination was strength, not submission. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe conspires to ensure that such dignity is recognized, such discrimination is corrected, and such service is honored in the most public and powerful way possible. The story you've just witnessed reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized and sometimes discriminated against based on appearance alone. The men and women who've protected our leaders, who've taken bullets and knife wounds in service to our nation, deserve respect, regardless of what they wear or how they look. A trembling hand might be the result of stopping an assassination. Worn clothes might be the choice of someone who values comfort over impression. Never judge a book by its cover. You might be dismissing a hero. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. Let's create a global map of communities that honor those who've served in the shadows, protecting our leaders and our democracy. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that true worth isn't found in appearance, but in character, service, and sacrifice. Because every veteran who's been judged unfairly deserves to know that their service is valued and their dignity respected.